we have these very costly problems in the real world, such as fraud and other kinds of malicious behavior. We have all kinds of costly solutions, such as controls, right? We have policies and procedures. We have auditing to make sure that we're actually following those controls. And then in certain cases, such as like payment fraud, we're using AI to try to detect it, right? So we're putting in all this effort to try to solve these costly problems. And then on the other side, we have these very powerful cryptographic tools. We have hashes, digital signatures, hash pointers, right? And I'm not going to go into detail about all of those are because I only have 7 minutes. So that's not going to happen. But I think, we have all of these tools. We could be using them to actually solve these problems. And the general public has no idea, right, about them. So something's missing. And so just to go a little bit into detail about what I imagine these products might look like, with hashes, right, we can create unalterable documents where if there's even the slightest change, the hashes won't match and we can tell that something has been changed. With digital signatures, we can create unforgeable signatures. So unlike, a physical signature where anyone can create it, right? With a digital signature, if you have the private key and someone else does not, they can't forge your signature. And then lastly, with hash pointers, effectively blockchain, we can create time-stamped records such that we can prove that a document existed at a certain point in time and was not just created after the fact and kind of inserted in place. So then there's the question, why aren't we using the cryptographic tools? And I think in many cases, we are actually using some of the cryptographic tools, and the general public just doesn't realize it, right? So for instance, like the credit card that you might use that has a chip that has a private key on it that's creating digital signatures. We use it for software verification, all sorts of things, but the general public has no idea. Second, I think there's a cultural disconnect between cryptographers, who are mostly mathematicians, and the people that actually need their problems to be solved, who are business people. I think these two groups are just not talking. And then three, and I'm very sorry to all the cryptographers in the room, but cryptographers are not known for good user experience design. So there's this really famous paper called Why Johnny Can't Encrypt that's from 1999, and it goes through user studies. I think they had maybe 20 users or so trying to use PGP. And they were not able to do very basic tasks, right? So something is broken there. And then four, I think there's confusion about blockchains. So all of the things that I mentioned, all of the things that we can do in terms of making sure that documents haven't been altered, things like that, I think the general public hears about these cool things and they attribute them to decentralized blockchains and cryptocurrencies. And they think that you have to have cryptocurrencies to be able to do all those things. But in reality, Bitcoin, while it was incredibly innovative in solving the double spending problem and figuring out how to do that without using a central authority, Bitcoin didn't invent hashes. It didn't invent digital signatures, right? We've had digital signatures since the 70s. And it also did not invent blockchains, so to speak. The word blockchain, came after Bitcoin. But if you look at Bitcoin's references in the Bitcoin white paper, one of those references is a 1991 paper by Haber and Stornetta that's about timestamping services and using hash pointers as part of these timestamping services to make sure that those documents were not created currently and just kind of inserted back in time, to make sure that they were created at that point in the past. So I know I don't have very much time here, but I want to go over what that timestamping service actually looks like according to the Haber and Stornetta paper. So you can imagine that users pay with a credit card. There's no cryptocurrency involved. The user submits a document hash to this service. The service adds the hash to a chain of hash pointers, a blockchain, but they're the only ones adding it. So it's centralized in that, there's not multiple parties adding transactions, it's only them. And then the service sends back a digitally signed receipt so that the user can have this proof that at least the service says that this is in the blockchain. And then the service regularly publishes the hash at the head of the chain to somewhere that they don't control, say in a newspaper or on another blockchain, perhaps a decentralized one. And then finally, the user can prove that the document was created before a certain point in time. Okay, so I want to say something kind of controversial here. What I'm going to argue is that for the timestamping service, centralization is actually fine. So I'm going to divide it up into two parts, which is safety and liveness. So for safety, we have the cryptography, right? We have the signed receipts. We have the user can have a copy of the chain, right? And if there's regular publication of the hash at the head of the chain in the newspaper or another blockchain, then we know that nothing has been altered in that chain, right? So for safety, I think we're fine as long as we have the cryptography. Then for liveness, the worst case scenario is very different than in a cryptocurrency scenario. So for timestamping documents, the worst case scenario is that the centralized service drops requests just kind of willy-nilly, or it shuts down entirely. And so since it's just a timestamping service, you could switch to a competitor. Unlike a cryptocurrency, there's no value locked up on chain. Like as long as you keep the copy of the chain that you had, you can prove that your document existed at a certain point in time, even if that service goes down, right? So that's my controversial statement. Hopefully we can talk about it later. But my takeaway is that decentralized blockchains are costly, right? You have this global consensus about the ordering of transactions. And we have all of these problems in business that we have very costly solutions for, like controls and auditing and things like that. But cryptographic tools are incredibly cheap, right? In some cases, it's like as cheap as typing a letter into your Word doc. And I think we should be using those. And I'm really interested in creating those products that bridge that gap. So thank you so much. And do I have time for a few questions?
Are you basically just saying that the open document files should be Git archives instead of Java archives?
Sorry, say that again?
The open document files should be Git archives instead of Java archives, so they have commits that are signed when you save your docs?
Yeah, I think that would definitely be part of it. I think society moving in a direction where, say, and there have been some efforts in this regard, but say like lawmakers having various different edits to different laws actually be, Git commits and things like that. Like I think society moving in that direction would be a huge plus.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate.